are our friends that go well with wine. So our first reader is Dave Waldrop.
Take it on, Dave.
Start with a bang.
He's the founder, I told you.
I'd like to read this book to you. But I won't, I'll just read one thing out of it. I went to school on the GI Bill, studied psychology and speech and hearing, and got my master's in counseling. Dealt with a lot of people down through time, and in the process of doing that, it dawned on me one day I could write a poem about that. And it's, I don't talk about a lot of happy, too many happy things in this, and some of them are kind of sad, but that's what I dealt with people on. So I wrote this thing, tried to rhyme it up. It's called Strength. Sometimes I feel cheated, sometimes mistreated, sometimes I feel like a fool. Sometimes feel disgusted and sometimes get busted because I don't always play by the rules. Sometimes feel rejected and sometimes detected for something that some think is wrong. Sometimes feel defeated, but my life ain't complete till I've sung all my outlaw songs. Sometimes feel like quitting. This is what people told me now. You got to remember that. Sometimes feel like quitting, sometimes like splitting. Places I've never been. Sometimes feel like staying, simply delaying till I've tasted my share of sin. Sometimes feel dismayed, sometimes betrayed. Sometimes I feel like a fool. By the feelings I place on the line. I'm seeking refuge from trouble and abuse, but I keep on going one day at a time. Sometimes seek treasure, and sometimes share pleasure with someone who's looking for love. Sometimes feel run down, sometimes wear a frown, and I stop and thank God above for giving me strength to go the full length in a life that's different each day, till I breathe my last breath on the threshold of death. I hope I can always say, I'm an outlaw, a cowboy, a misfit for sure. Feel more like I do now than I did before. That's what people told me, no kidding. Thank you. And this is one that I put in the Macon County News and Shoppers Guide the other day. I became relatively famous for this. My wife liked it, my cousin liked it. That's how you get relatively famous.
I just got the check apart of it.
Yeah. This is called Gun Ownership Must Change.
Amen.
If you disagree, just keep your mouth shut for a few minutes and give me as I go out. At times that the U.S. Constitution has been deemed to be out of tune with the times, Congress has amended it. Emmett Bondurant's letter last week eloquently described how a change is desperately needed now with regard to the Second Amendment. We have a standing army second to none in the world. We have the National Guard. Few civilians, gun owners, would claim they are part of a well-regulated militia. Yet, National Rifle Association spokespeople steadily mislead people into believing that, quote, liberals want to disarm them. They pretend that any proposed gun regulations are only the first step to denying Americans their Second Amendment right. I am a liberal who owns guns. My friends and neighbors almost unanimously agree there is no need for assault weapons in the civilian sector. I will join millions of liberals to oppose any attempt to take reasonable guns away from people. All Americans should place a high value on human life. We have a duty to protect each other from assault under the guise of gun rights. If our churches and schools aren't safe these days, something is very wrong in America. Gun rights must be changed.
Well,
Thank you, sir. Our next reader is Tom Baker. Yay.
You tell them, Tom.
Relatively speaking, I'm famous too because my wife.
There you go.
As you may remember from last week, I started reading out of the memoirs of a young warrior wannabe. So I'm going to continue on, trying to stay awake, and hopefully I won't bore you too much. Last week I finished up with that sweep through the village where the young girl came out. I'm easing on from that. The difficult thing about being part of a quick reaction force is that for a short time you were in the fight. Then you were back in the rear echelon area. That night we were back drinking beer at a small makeshift EM club. Talk about culture shock. We heard the battle for Way getting even more brutal. A couple of our guys transferred out to a grunt unit, and within 2 weeks both were dead. We go out again in a few days, and the fight is always over there. If we are sporting Alpha, then it's Bravo that gets hit. When we go back to Reagan, Charlie gets hit. It messes with your mind. Is that survival guilt? Then we fight each other. Juicers fighting the pothead, whites fighting blacks. So much anger, very little release. Unless you're 19 and you've got alcohol or whatever. A couple of weeks later, after another eventful sweep through a nearby village, I'm playing poker alongside a big guy from Northern California named Bob Rivera. He and I are two other guys from Puerto Rico. They had two friends just watching. We're all drunk. Rivera and I won about $100 from these guys, and they didn't like it. Staggering outside the hooch, somebody said something, and bam, it's on. Rivera is fast as hell with his fists. Me, not so much. I threw a punch and got hit by two. I managed to glance over at Rivera and see he was kicking his two guys' asses while I'm getting mine kicked. I managed to, wait a minute. I'm bleeding from a split lip and cut knuckles when I suddenly get hit from behind. Down I go amongst booted feet kicking at me. A black guy from the motor pool, who I barely know, was kicking me in the ribs. I remember curling up to protect my face, wondering what the hell was going to happen. Lucky for me, the company commander heard the ruckus and stepped out of the officer's hooch with his drawn .45. I'll give you people just 10 seconds to get out of my sight. And he meant it. By that time, Rivera is helping me to my feet, taking me to the infirmary, growled the captain, and headed back to his hooch. 2 cracked ribs and several knots on my head. I got no light duty. 2 days later, Rivera and I go looking for the dude. We call it the midnight bed check, but he's gone. D-Roast back to the States. Maybe it was the best. LBJ, Long Been Jail, was a tough place. About 3 months in country, 8 of us were sent down to Cameron Bay to help the riggers there understand what we needed on the flight line at Fubai for the skid load. 2 days into our training, the first sergeant found out we were part of a quick reaction force back at Fubai and asked us for help. 2 guys had disappeared off perimeter guard duty that night, and he wanted to do a search and rescue. They probably went AWOL, but we don't know for sure. Help me find out if they're out there. Hell yeah, First Sergeant, we'll help, we shouted. Anything was better than this crap. Yeah, right. I had just made E5, so the LT, whom the First Sergeant had asked to go with us, wanted me to be his RTO, the radio operator. I'd humped with the Prick 25 before, so I agreed. We unasked our deuce and a halves at first light and literally crawled through the worst jungle I had ever seen. The temperature was around 112 and the humidity was about 95. It sucked the water and the life right out of you. Prick weighed about 25 pounds, but when you add your M14, that's what we were carrying. Double water, C rations, triple ammo, it got heavy. There was one spot where it took us 3 hours to hack and crawl through 200 yards. The VC could have heard us coming a mile away, but they were smarter than us. Hell, they wasn't in that mess. Bledsoe had been struggling to keep his shit together lately. His sorry upbringing or something was haunting him, but the LT had him walking point. Me and the LT was right behind him. I almost went down with heat exhaustion, but managed to pop a couple of salt tablets and drink some more water and push on. Bledsoe, on the other hand, was about done. Unfortunately, just before the LT was going out to have somebody switch with him, Bledsoe fell through a freak hole in the limestone ledge that we were crossing over. He simply took a step and then down he went into a hole covered by jungle vegetation. We always look for tripwires, booby traps, even bungee stake pits. This hole was just there. We eased up beside it and looked down expecting to see Bledsoe impaled on bamboo stakes, but he wasn't. Banged up but broken, but nothing broken. We cut a couple of poles and slid down into the hole. Our medic, a kid named Exler from Pittsburgh, climbed down and checked Bledsoe over. Me and a couple of the other guys helped him get him out of the hole. God, he was mad. But we pushed on. About 30 minutes later, we finally crawled and hacked our way out of the jungle and found ourselves skirting the edge of an old field grown up with elephant grass about head high. Couldn't see shit there either. Second Louis with a map and a compass is a dangerous thing. Well, ours was having a hard time figuring out where the hell we were. Get the captain on the horn, Baker, grunted Lieutenant Stone. Yes, sir. I replied as I pulled the antenna out from the straps that had been stuffed down into as we humped through the jungle. I called Black Hawk 3, which was a call sign for Captain Everius, and handed the headset to Stone, who tried to explain that there wasn't an old field on the map we had. Everius' voice boomed over the headset, "Just shoot a bearing for the airfield and get the hell out of there." Stone, red-faced, looked at me and dragged his finger across his neck and smiled. A good guy, I thought. We headed due south, parallel to the old field, which had numerous scrub banyan trees scattered across it. For some reason, I left the antenna up, which is a big no-no. VC liked to shoot the RTO man as well as anybody standing next to him. The new point guy took us under one of the banyan trees. Did I tell you about the red ants? Well, on top of leeches and pit vipers, big ugly spiders, and the VC, we had red ants. Communist ants. Big, mean, biting ants. I'd forgotten for a second about these ants, but when my antenna struck one of the low-hanging limbs of the banyan tree, the red ants fell on me like the wrath of the old gods.
Oh.
That is how they operate. They fall en masse on unsuspecting prey and sting them to death. About 1 million of the things fell on me, and I began an odd mix of a striptease and a country hop. Radio, rifle, shirt, it all came off. I'm screaming, slapping myself, and running around like a madman. Had the BC hit us at that moment, a bullet would have been preferable than been eaten alive. 6 or 7 of the guys started slapping me with their hands or booty hats, whatever they had. The rest simply watched. There, in the middle of this pounding, in the middle of a search and rescue, in the middle of a damn war, we all found a moment of humor. We found our youth again. Wouldn't last long, but for a few minutes we forgot about the war and just laughed like hell.
Those weren't dry rants.
Ants aren't so funny. Our next reader is Matt Nelson.
Yay!
Matt.
Alright, for those who don't know, I do beat poetry involving the song titles of a particular artist. And I decided to really push my luck by doing, something about a beat artist, and that would be Bob Dylan. So, and it was very hard, putting all of his songs together because they span 50 years, 50 plus years. But I did have fun with this thing, but nothing bad is going to be there. Hey you, stay away from Mr. Tambourine Man over there. Everyone must get stoned is a horrible way to live and think, as leads to bad decisions and knocking on heaven's door. So, the dirge of humanity's folly is sung under a blue moon. With a disease of conceit spreading ever more like a wildfire, all we can do is keep pressing on away from the plague and listen to long since forgotten but sweet chimes of freedom. I may be a man of constant sorrow and other things. Nevertheless, I can offer you some shelter from the storm. I don't know much about this world gone wrong, or when the enigmatic end of Desolation Row is. Yet, I'm sure it all began when the horrid masters of war came under the red sky of profits and schemes of misery. The corporation soon closed the gates of Eden and left behind a monster standing in the doorway of peace, causing all who barely trespass to pay in blood. Let's stick together and find what's beyond the horizon. I've experienced one too many cold mornings alone, said, with even more shooting stars gone by in utter vain. Said, I can't remain living the blues. I can remain living the blues without you, but time passes by slowly when that old feeling of blowing in the wind sweeps over you like a large wave. Together we shall go down the highway of uncertainty into a new morning made brighter by our budding friendship. Yet we may see too much of nothing, new or old. And said, life is hard no matter what you try and do, and there's no time to think about even small things, as the tempest of life, said, keeps everyone among the chaos. Sometimes you gotta travel on through the gloom and doom to not end up like all the tired horses and former riders. Even a drifter's escape can lead to a small patch of paradise. You're no good being in this realm of sorrow, my dear. Said, what you need is use some of that old black magic and use it where teardrops fell too much and hard. Become the stardust that restores a ghost of a smile, or you end up as another sad-eyed lady of the lowlands, unable to do more than polish a simple copper kettle. Stay with me, and I can help you on your million miles, to be guided by the moonlight and early morning rain. It hurts me to think about the long and wasted years, brought on by the forming of the sea of 10 angels and the wicked messengers that served the masters, that forcing others to join in the day of locusts, it said, only to become pawns in the game of ruining lives. I can feel the times are a-changing, slowly from me to you. I'll always remember to never say goodbye, it said, and not to be late when the ship of death comes in. I know that I'm not in my time of dying or close to it. However, the man in me knows it is mortal, and like a rolling stone must stop someplace unknown. Remaining forever young is impossible, and we're not sitting on top of the world or listening to the thunder on the mountains around us. In the end, I shall be free, dignity intact, said, knowing a simple twist of fate led me to you, hopefully fixing everything that is broken, while watching the river of life flow on. Just remember to see my grave is kept clean, in case the restless farewell comes too soon. One might actually be becoming a real beat poet, but I would prefer to be called a radish, because beats, I don't really like them too much.
Matt, you will be proud to know I can sing all of Desolation Row. I'm actually working on the Memphis Blues.
Doesn't surprise me.
Is it on? Did I turn it off? Okay. Our next reader is Auburn Friedman, poet of the sewers.
Now for the director's epic cameo.
So we continue with the truth about plumbing. Where we left off, this chapter is called In the Beginning and How I Became a Plumber. And I had moved to Israel on a spiritual quest and found myself as part of the plumbing crew, a completely inexperienced plumbing crew, and we were all charged with rebuilding the plumbing system on a kibbutz. A kibbutz is a community in Israel, and one that had been abandoned 25 years earlier, and we were charged with rebuilding it, and we knew nothing. None of us had any experience in plumbing. And so where we left off, we had just removed, we had to replace all the water heaters in these 40 small homes, stone homes, and we figured out how to remove the first one, and then we kind of looked at it and said, okay, what do we do now? Okay. So this was before the days of flexible copper water heater connectors. These tanks were plumbed into place with rigid iron pipe. The disconnect was a cast iron union on each of the hot and cold water lines with a gate valve as the inlet. the pipes were configured to fit the specific tank we had removed. But that model of tank was no longer available. In order to install a new tank, the plumbing would have to be reconfigured. Normally, a plumber would use tools for this task that were not at that moment at our disposal, specifically an iron pipe cutter and threader and a set of pipe wrenches. We would need to reroute the incoming and outgoing pipes to meet the fittings on the new tank. To do this, we needed the right combination of elbows and various sizes of small sections of pipe already threaded on both ends. These are called nipples. The double entendre is persistent throughout a day of plumbing repair. When we began this process, we didn't know of an inventory of plumbing parts on the farm. So before we could replace this first water heater, we had to scour the land and all the buildings for spare plumbing parts. We found an occasional elbow or nipple under sinks, in kitchen drawers, one or two on closet floors, in the dirt next to the foundations of buildings. And then we struck gold and found a major store of pipe and fittings where it had been placed more than 20 years earlier in the corner of one of the old equipment sheds. These were pipe and fittings in all sizes, ranging from 1/4 to 4 inch. There was also a manual pipe cutter, threader, and a pipe vise mounted on a big, heavy wooden table. Underneath the table was an assortment of not too badly rusted pipe wrenches, screwdrivers, chisels, mallets, wire brushes, and other tools. There were several rusty but intact unopened cans of pipe joint compound. We were in business. It took intuitive thinking and practice to learn how to use these primitive plumbing tools. Cutting pipe threads with a manual pipe threader takes skill and experience, and we wasted plenty of valuable pipe through our trial and error learning process. It was a revelation to use a few drops of oil to lubricate the parts and prevent cracking the male threads during the extreme friction and pressure involved in the thread cutting process. Clamp the pipe firmly in the vise, apply a few drops of oil to the end of the pipe, then place the die on the end of the pipe. Grab the extended handles of the threader and push forward while slowly moving the die clockwise for a turn. Then back off to allow the first thread waste to break away. Move it clockwise for another turn. Back off. Add a few more drops of oil. Turn it again and continue this process until you have the needed length of thread that varies by pipe size. For example, for nominal 3/4 inch iron pipe, we'd make the thread about 3/4 inches deep. It was another revelation to understand the need for pipe joint compound or pipe dope when screwing a threaded pipe into a joint. Plumbing pipe threads or male fittings are tapered so that the circumference of the pipe thread at the end gradually increases in size for the length of the thread. Likewise, but in reverse, the receiving female fitting is tapered wide at the end, receding to a smaller circumference within the inside of the fitting. So as the pipe male is screwed into the female, yes, the entendre, the threads form an ever-tightening seal. If it is tightened too much, however, it will strip the threads and destroy the seal and the pipe. But even if it is tightened perfectly, it will leak under pressure unless you use pipe dope on the threads before screwing the two fittings together. Pipe dope is a gray, soft, and liquidy putty-like substance that can be easily spread on the male pipe threads with a small brush. All the male threads must be filled with pipe dope. As the pipe is tightened into the female fitting, the pipe dope is squished down in between the merging threads of the two fittings and under tremendous pressure provides a positive seal against the leakage of even highly pressurized water. Today, more often, plumbers use Teflon tape to accomplish the same purpose with much less of a mess and in much less time. But Teflon tape was not available on Kibbutz Gezer in 1972, and we didn't know of its existence. So this was how I began to learn the skills and nuances of the plumbing domain. It was through the most primordial process of learning the basic physical principles of how to take apart and put together old pipes and fittings while maintaining a watertight seal under extremely primitive conditions with tools from another era. Each joint was a challenge involving intense concentration, stress, and possible excruciating failure that could require doing the entire process over again. These first self-taught plumbing lessons engraved themselves in my central nervous system and laid the foundation for a more comprehensive, torturous course of study on which to build. The hard realities of the physical universe. English teachers, poets, and novelists, attorneys, politicians, newspaper and television reporters can engage in metaphor, fantasy, hyperbole, or subjective interpretation of the truth. But a plumber can indulge none of this. Yes, it is an unyielding truth that shit will not flow uphill, and it is a strict cultural standard, I'm not sure why, that hot water must always be on the left. But there is much more depth to this commonly oversimplified reality. If even one fitting is not threaded properly, tightened to the right specifications, neither too much nor too little, and perfectly sealed with joint compound or Teflon tape, it will leak with potentially severe consequences to the home, the homeowner, and to the financial security of the plumber himself. If a pipe is not cut to the precise length needed, it will not fit or will be forced to accommodate stress for which it was not designed, resulting in near future leakage and or breakage and systemic failure. If the configuration of waste and vent pipes is not installed correctly, water will not drain properly, traps will fail, sewage gas, which is raw methane, will enter the house, the inhabitants will suffer dire health consequences, and the house can explode if a match is lit or an electrical spark ignites in the wrong time and place. Any plumber worth his salt, upon beginning a task, finds it necessary to assume an altered state of consciousness that enables deep concentration to avoid the pitfalls of an endless obstacle course of rock-hard physical limitations and realities. There is no guessing aloud, no fantasizing, no wishing that things work differently than they actually do. It is either hot or cold, left or right, up or down. It either leaks or it doesn't leak. It is either dry or it is wet. It either drains or it doesn't. It either works or it doesn't work. There is no compromise with the reality of the situation. This is the state of mind that is drilled and cemented into the core being of a plumber. If you wish to seek an opinion that is void of delusional thinking, the right person to ask is a plumber. This does not preclude, however, a capacity for innovation and the use of imagination. Although the plumber's mind is trapped within the limitations of strict physical realities, he or she is often required to create solutions to paradoxical and seemingly insurmountable obstacles. I think my time is probably up.
I didn't check, but probably it is. These pipes seem very heteronormative.
Disturbing, people remember.
Our next reader is Gary Carden, who has a saga of education for all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, counsel.
Watch out
You
now.
are holding the source, so you should have a clock.
Some of you may want to ask me some questions at the end of this one. I'll try not to take up extra time, but this is one of those situations where you're not quite sure what the truth is. And, well, that'll make sense later on. Well, kind hearts, I guess it's time to tell you about Miss Neff. As far as I know, this is a true story, and I did actually witness the end of this famous day. I keep asking old friends if they were there, and they tend to be evasive. They say, well, I think I was. Or, I wasn't in that class. My friend David Schulman said he wasn't there, but he got there just after it happened. That's my story, too. I graduated in 1953, but many of my friends were still in the school, so I often came down to the old high school in the building in the afternoon to wait for my friends to get out of class. Just when class ended, I would often sit on the steps and wait for my friends. A man named Carr Hooper was principal, and he was stern and unpleasant, so I didn't go inside the building. Ronnie and Kirk, my two best friends, said that Principal Hooper had called an assembly to explain why he would not tolerate any foolishness in the school, or on his watch, as he put it, which was because he had been a prisoner in a Japanese camp during World War II, and he had lost one of his testicles. Since that time, he said he had lost his sense of humor. I don't know how he lost his testicle. When I arrived at the high school on this particular day, there was a lot of excitement. There were people running in and out of the principal's office. The police and the highway patrol arrived, and shortly thereafter, I saw them and Principal Hooper escort a little woman out of the building. They put her in the back of a police car. The only memory I have is how small that woman was in comparison to the policeman, the patrolman, and the principal who surrounded her as she was led away. When I asked, I was told that the little woman was Miss Neff, the new biology teacher. And it seems that she had pulled a gun in the classroom. I knew she was the new biology teacher, and I knew she was having difficult times in teaching. And Kirk and Ronnie, my best friends, they said that she had discipline problems. They said she was so soft-spoken and shy, and within a week the students had begun to take advantage of her. Things had gotten so bad that the students ignored her. Ronnie said they talked to each other, got up and walked around the room. The boys would go and come from the smoke room, which was across the hall, without even consulting her. Ronnie said the girls put on makeup, read true stories, and talked to each other. Through all this, Miss Neff continued to talk, discussing phylums and spiders and bugs. Sometimes she would stop and she would say, "Students, I must insist, please get quiet." They ignored her. Well, they did until this day. Now, according to several students who were there, Miss Neff got her huge handbag
and set it down in the middle of the desk, and then she stood and she said loudly, "I must insist. Please get quiet." Then she drew a large gun. According to Ronnie, it was a .45. And she said, "I really must insist." Now, versions differ considerably about this. After all, it was 40 years ago. What she did next. Some said she cocked the pistol and fired it into the ceiling, and a few chunks of plaster fell on her desk. One student, male, wet his pants, and the urine ran down his leg and created a little stream that went all the way to the back of the room. That got everybody's attention. Miss Neff said, "You will need to take some notes." The room was filled with the sound of pencils and pens, people writing as hard as they could. "We are talking about the arachne today." And she rose to write that word on the blackboard. Other versions said that when the class saw the gun, they became very quiet, but you could hear some of them whispering as they took notes. One of the boys who was in the smoke room raced up the steps to the principal's office. One version said she never fired that gun. She simply removed it from the handbag, held it above her head for a moment, and then laid it carefully on the desk. One student even stated that she aimed it at a girl who had been giggling just a moment before, but laid the gun down when the giggling stopped. When the policeman entered the room, Miss Neff gathered up her things, including her handbag, and she walked out the door. The gun was nowhere to be seen, but it was later found in the wastebasket. I've thought a lot about Miss Neff over the years. I later heard that when they took her to jail, she sat primly on her bed waiting, but she refused to speak to anyone. Police were dispatched to her rented room in the hopes of finding something about Miss Neff, but they only found a few letters. Someone had torn the return address off all of the letters and the envelopes. It was as though she planned it. In recent years, I've read a great deal about people who have become insane as a desperate response to a world that they find too unpleasant to live in. There are artists now who live in mental institutions. They paint each day. Some of them are wonderfully talented. Their creative works become valuable. Sometimes they create an imaginary world which they move into. That's their preference to the one that they abandoned. Oh, that's it. What I thought you might be interested in, that's argumentative. This. I put my stories on Facebook, and I have people that read them and comment on them. I've been doing that for 3 years. I've been getting a bit of mail about Miss Neff. They were like, Gary, I was in that class. I never could find anybody before, but I think I've found 6 people now. Their version differs from mine. One said that she was a stocky woman, and that the first day of class, she slammed the door and turned around and says, "My name's Miss Neff, and I am tough." Well, maybe she did, but it didn't work. You know, something went wrong. Who is right? I persist in seeing her as a frail, shy little woman. I taught school. My first year that I taught, I had a classroom that had 30 and it had 30 seats and 45 students. And so they stood up. And a lot of them were bigger than I was. And they called me Little Teach. Come here, Little Teach. Sit down, Little Teach. I used to go home and whimper. I was raised by my grandmother, and I don't want to go back. You got to go back, son. Go back, go back, go back. So I have a lot of sympathy for the Miss Neffs of this world. Thank you.
Rightly so. I have many an intern right now who's probably would find that very satisfactory. I believe we may have a new reader here with Molly Bowman. No? Not so much? Okay. Diane Dew?
So I have a couple of poems here. Normally I'm a lyricist, but I've been trying to expand my horizons. I'm not going to tell you the title of this poem. Maybe you can figure it out as I go along. And then I have another one that I will tell you the title. All right. A breed of vampires feast unnoticed throughout the day, and as the sunset unfolds night's blanket, they become strongest and pluck from victims in flight. Seeming toothlessly without fear, they breathe in the sweat that lets them know their hosts are near. They leave marks no human will ever forget, and laugh hauntingly at man's regret to wear protection from their harm. They've taken over our legs and arms. The world is suffering one bite at a time, and during summer, their power is at its prime. Y'all know what kind of vampires they are?
Mosquito.
Yes, and the gnats that are around here. I recently wrote that.
Why?
All right. And this next one is called To the Group Mom on Her Bachelorette Weekend. Because we all know bachelorette weekends are supposed to be fun, but if you're a group mom, sometimes that's not the case. You are the bride. It's almost your day. This weekend you're royalty. Step out under Nashville's Broadway lights. Own the streets. They're yours tonight. It says so on your sash and is writ in glitter upon your crown. Take that first shot as your bridesmaid buys you as she buys herself one more. But don't forget to tip the barkeep since your maid's now 4 drinks in. Move on to the next location and snap Polaroids along the way. Slide through the door and muddle through crowds to have 1 drinks on the house. Turn to find your maids cheering you on, -1 who slipped away. Blush with worry, wonder where she's gone. Text her, call her, then find her. Call out to the stand where she buys the city's finest burger. Note your missed meal, no one was ready for reservations at 8. Run out and fetch her, take a quick bite, return and round up the rest. Waltz to the floor where the others dance, soberly smile, take their hands, call an Uber as you lead them out. Chatter and rave, what a night. Sigh, there she goes, that one maid's burger is now splattered on the ground. Crawl in the cab and buckle your maids, point the driver home and pay. Pull your maid off the cab driver, he uncomfortably leaves. Lead your girls through the door and be sure to tuck them in off the floor. Step out under your balcony lights, have a smoke, this is your night. You are the bride, it's almost your day, you're passed from every party. Thank you.
Is Andrea LaForce? Welcome.
This is a piece, so if I go over 10 minutes, just say, shut up.
I'll wait for it.
Thank you. And to give you a hint, it's about atomic weapons. Okay. It was in the pulling apart that I became conscious. As my consciousness bloomed, it told me everything was right, that the world held me in its arms, that falling was normal. And then I hit. I began to rent from my own body, joints created to split, shattered, and fire consumed me. My soul unleashed to the world. My soul is Inferno. 3, Son. Sloshing your 3-mile radius around is harder than it looks. I can only make it look simplistic because I've been doing it for 72 years. The bodies, they don't stop moaning. I split them apart. It's in my nature. How do you handle being crafted for destruction? You destroy. These old joints haven't moved right since I dismantled in the firmament. And whenever I move, they groan louder, but I don't let them stop me. They are just some things an old bomb's attracted to. I can't stop my nature, so I don't try. We call her Holy Mother. She is one of us. It runs in her veins. She tried to stop her nature according to Fat Man. One day he leans into me and says, "You know there's a savior for us." And I, the skeptic, the one who coughs up firestorm and spits shockwaves, shake my head. We can't be saved. We have to meet her. Holy Mother, a portrait. Dark hair cascading down in patches, skin peeling in some spots where open sores reside, ulcers in her mouth that make eating near impossible, a cough that doesn't go away, a body that is the breeding ground for cancer, but she hasn't gotten it in her 32 years, a mystery to doctors, an enigma to the world, a blessing for us. Her poisoning springs from 5 locations on her body, the wrist, her left side, and her 2 feet. We go to Holy Mother. 2 mushroom clouds migrate together, suspended death inside of us. There are 12 of us in total, Satan Trinity being the first. Thin Man sits across from me. He's not entirely there. 1/3 of him is missing, and he still has the power to spontaneously create a fission reaction. He is more powerful than all of us, but he cannot be contained in all of his 17 feet. "How are you today, Trinity?" I ask. She looks at me distantly and coughs up desert. "And you, Thin Man?" He twitches at odd times that find no synchronization. Acceleration rate, plutonium bullet. I nod at Thin Man's statement but give him up, talking altogether. "And you, Fat Man?" He smells like decay, like I do. I notice that there are shadows plastered on his bounds, frozen there. He grunts. I look over to the others, 3134, 2707, and some undistinguishable others. "We're going to be dismantled soon," one lamented. The other ones seemed too eager to find out their potential. "My father created me, but deserted me in the end," Trinity speaks. "I didn't know my father, but I was adopted for a day by a woman plane and her son. It pains me, the days I split apart, shattering over towns and heads and trees. I imagine the day before I woke, wombed in the woman plane. I imagine it feels safe. They move within me, and I can only think of swallowing so much life in one gulp, but they fit inside my radius so easily. Enter Holy Mother. Imagine radiance like you've never seen it. She looks like death and dying, but she silences ancient groans and growls. She pulls each of us in automatically. We are leaning further into the table. It's silent. I try to make my radius smaller, try to shrink, but I cannot pull my borders together. I am too much space. My borders bump into Fat Man repeatedly. I think we are both trying to disappear, but the thought of salvation outweighs that of judgment. I sit tall as her eyes fall on me. Those eyes are full of cataracts, but she is still able to fix her gaze on me. "I'm glad you all could make it. Welcome back to your homeland," she says. In her hand she holds a bowl of steaming black mushrooms. My 100,000 mouths are hungry. But first, let us pray. Dear Divine, save us from our nuclear fallout and forgive us for our shockwave mornings. Lead us not into total destruction, but deliver us from firestorms. Her hands place the bowl of black mushrooms on the table, and we take her peace offering. I notice that she is wearing a crown of dark mushrooms and blooming flowers. "Do you know why I have called you here today?" she asks. I glance around the table. Thin Man is twitching and trying to understand how to use the utensils before him to devour the mushrooms. Fat Man is picking at shadows as if they were food in his teeth. Trinity is choking on desert dust. 3134 is making exploding noises, while another one tries to interpret those sounds into movement. "Because you understand pain," I say. She looks at me and nods. Even though I know her eyes are damaged, I feel the bodies inside me prickle and move toward the outer parts of my borders, as if they are pressing against me to get out. I cannot get comfortable. Fat Man suddenly coughs and writhes in pain until he coughs up a mushroom unchewed onto the table. It rolls to the center, and I notice bits of flesh sitting smothered in saliva on the mushroom. The smell permeates the dining room, rancid and decaying. Holy Mother hardly notices. "I understand pain," she begins. Her head falls down and she holds out her hands before her, gently touching the birthmarks that peel to reveal blood. I tear up and have to wipe my eyes. "No one recognizes our pain, Holy Mother. Thank you for being the first." "Detonation is not a part of nature," she adds. "Yes, it is." Now 3134 pipes up. "And I'm going to North Korea soon. It's going to be huge. Smiling as if she's going to eviscerate 3134, she says, "Don't rely too much on your fusion, 3134. 3134, I begin. North Korea hardly matters to us. If you want to be like Fat Man and I, you'll need to hit somewhere that really matters. And maybe being dropped during a world war to make a point," Fat Man interjects. "Or have your detonation not matter at all and hit some desert land," Trinity coughs. "They'll name you Tweet if you detonate on North Korea," 2707 remarks. "Why Tweet?" I ask. Holy Mother is chewing on mushrooms and I look over. I begin to feel sick. "I don't feel very well," I remark, ignoring the floating conversation around me on the reasons behind naming conventions for atomic weapons. It feels like there are things within me untangling themselves, things that need to stay tangled. "Aren't you hungry, little boy?" Holy Mother asks. "No, Holy Mother. Your meal of mushrooms is good, but it does not agree with me." She does not appear concerned. The mushroom Fat Man coughed up still lies at the center of the table. I notice that as Holy Mother hovers around the mushrooms, her radiation waves dissipate. I hunger for them and I find life in those waves. The bodies within me begin pulling and pushing. I look over to Fat Man, who is struggling now to keep within his radius. It's Thin Man who falls first, right out of his chair. He's a ball of shaking and spasming. We look at him from over the table, motionless. "Thin Man, are you okay?" I ask. He's making odd noises and thrashing. The chair claps into the floor and I can feel his radiation blossoming. I can hear the plutonium swirl. I can feel the untangled compound slush within me as well. I am rushing, trying to rush, staying put. The bodies keep me grounded. I have never been unable to move before. All eyes fall on Holy Mother. She is swift in approaching Fat Man. I see her hand fall gently on top of his head as if she's calming him down like a small child. That's until I realize what's happening. He's dismantling, piece by piece. A panic rises within me, the same panic that blocked my throat when I became conscious. "Thin Man, we need to get out of here. Trinity, we need to escape." They struggle to move, and it's only Trinity that can take a step toward the door. "I'm hungry," Holy Mother states matter-of-factly. "I'm hungry. I'm hungry." The mushrooms are rolling around in my stomach, and I topple to the ground as my form tries to purge, but the bodies get stuck in the way. "Please move." They refuse. I cough and I sputter and I choke. "You came to my door and I fed you," Holy Mother states. "You all here betrayed me." "Holy Mother," I sputter, "we are your disciples. We would follow you to the ends." "To the ends," Holy Mother reiterates. "You are our savior, Holy Mother. Why are you doing this to us?" As I look at her, I notice that her stomach is swelling. I see that more of her skin is sliding off and that she is red and made of muscle and bone. She is splitting in two, and it looks like she is unbothered. I am splitting in two. She is my reflection. She is the bodies inside of me. "You were saviors, but saviors of power, nothing more," she growls. The pain is getting to her. I fission what's left of my radioactive power, but it's pointless. Fat Man is talking in circles about dark deserts and dimly lit dinners, of tattooed shadows on streets and creation stories and assembly lines. Trinity exhales, and I think that's the last of her. The others, Tweet and 2707, are mummified. "Little boy," she calls. I cough in response. I am purging bodies by this point. I watch them exit me and pull on the floor. The remaining decomposition settles within my radius. 135,000. I am purging, Holy Mother, I promise. Another, they follow like clockwork. Her stomach is large as she ambles toward me. Somehow she knows where I am. Her birthmarks radiate energy. Feeling her hand melts my exterior. "Please," I gasp. I can feel her stomach touch me. There's pulsing creation living inside. Now she states, "I am become death."
I may have trouble getting rid of cookies after that. Thank you. Welcome. Our final reader is Wanda Mills, a long-time reader at the
This is what I've written before. You are my guinea pig.
I'm going to pass these out and then collect them again at the end.
and for you people, you don't understand me. So what matters? I have wrong. A year from the house, the rain bit bigger against the windows of the old brick school building. What recently had been loaded into office. My elbow part of the desk. I stared and stared at the busy work before me. My brother-in-law had asked me to come to work with him and do the tasks that his secretary had not had time to do. I knew this was just an excuse to get me out of the house and to get my mind off my problem. My mother passed away with my prior to this, I had spent most of my 25 years at home with her. Having been born with cerebral palsy, I have been trying to wheelchair and also have a speech defect. I was not I was not encouraged to make a life of my own. With my 6 marriage and my daddy worked during the day, I found it empty at home alone, almost unbearable. I'm the only other injury I had other than my family was my church. I had always had an active part of my church life. This was not only a spiritual refuge, but my only social outlet. Many times I questioned what was the most important to me. Reading today, I rolled my chair over the window and watched the rain dripping down the flat panes. This fog ended the ride, and in the hand mountains at the heavy ride. My heart went out to the mountains, but I felt hope and peace the rest of the world. in my church was round one round for me. It has been a long time since I felt the power in my life. I'm wondering, God, you just a book and title as my mother had. And trying to comfort me, people told me God had purpose in taking her. I cannot see the hand of God in my situation anymore than I can see the mountain peak through the big fog. My number president Wendy and my tears streaming down my face. I took my rock and I over the I said that high prayer was guidance. Yet high confidence in the forehead and being fat. And I really love my mother, but I love my face. My soul higher. God, why you hurt me? And then hurt rising in the spotlight shine. Singing days, the flower lifted, and the sun peered behind the door. Down your cloud, down your head. I saw the lamp of something lifting at the peak of the mountain. Many years ago, a great father placed a carve on the mountain. And I'm sorry, I don't know why. Father placed a carve on the mountain as a memorial to his father, to his daughter. My family and I had often talked about the beauty of the house as we rode through the area. And they found a clear night, the twilight beneath the house ring at the town mountain. The fire storm, as well as my grief and the children, had caused me to forget about the house. Looking at the house, I wept even harder. I realized my life was as bleak as the sky. But even in the storms of my life, the love and light of Calvary Cross still shone on me. At that window in the old blue building, I bowed my head and said, thank you, God, for showing me that you had not forsaken me. I want to invite you all to the Jackson County Library on Thursday, March the 29th. I will be reading 2 stories there, and then one of my co-workers will be bringing my book I am creating, and I would love to see you all there.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it's March 29th at the library at 6:30.
Yeah.
You should all come. It's gonna be amazing.
It's been about years since she did something like that.
And I will go and we will establish a time
Thank you.
for April. I will be right back, eat cookies, drink wine. Cookie writers.
Give me a cookie.
Oh,
they're very good.
They were long.
Are you looking for the cat?
Oh, and then it's Cedric.